Yo, what's up? So I figured I would make a video on all the ideas that I've been percolating on thus far. Just going over them quickly. Some of which I've already made videos about, so I guess if you need more in-depth, you can go and watch those. But anyway, let's start with the biggest thing, which is the whole tone stuff. The terms for these, the absolute terms, pitch specific, gold, and silver. I mean, pretty self-explanatory. This whole tone that contains these pitches is just what I call the gold whole tone, or the gold scale. And this is the silver group of silver notes from that, the other whole tone. The terms that are key relative are lunar and solar. So what that means is if you're building a major scale, traditional major scale, or Barry Harris major scale, the first three notes, do, re, mi, those first three notes are going to be, that's the lunar group, that is diatonic. And then, this sharp 5 of the key is, what I would call the pin, the note that is in between. It's the passing tone, right? So anyway, this is the lunar group, and all the other notes are the solar group. So here are the 4 notes that are diatonic to the major scale, and the ones that lie outside of the key are right here. And then chord relative, what does that exactly mean? He wanted to say hi, so what's up? What does that exactly mean? Well, I think it'll be more clear but when I go over the other topics, but basically the direction of movement and resolution to a specific chord. So yin and yang. I don't fucking know. I didn't have terms for these, so I just came up with something. Now onto the augmented. Same 3, categories, but for augmented, right? So absolute pitches. I didn't have terms for this for a long time. And I just, thought of these the other day, using the 4 suits of like a deck of cards to give nomenclature to the specific augmenteds. Pitch specific, clubs, so I guess if you needed a mnemonic, C for clubs, C augmented for clubs, heart, diamond, and spades. My only problem with this is that I already use heart as a term for something else totally unrelated. So I might change that to something else. There's different versions of the 4 suits of a deck of cards that I think is used in tarot cards. And I think it's like, what the fuck is it again? Swords, cups, batons, and fucking coins or some shit like that. Anyway, okay, on to the next thing. Key relative. So this I covered in my augmented and whole tone video. It's covered pretty good in that video, I think. But basically, summer, fall, spring, or winter and spring. If you wanted to go chromatic, chromatically would be summer, fall, spring, and winter. Again, I go over that in the video about this, but you know what? I'm just gonna let you pause this and read these, because I think that will do a better job of explaining than me rambling. Okay, on to the next. Chord relative, again, meaning the direction of resolution / movement. If you move an augmented to a certain chord, based on what chord it's moving to, like what function, that will change, I guess, what, term you give it, what of these 4 terms you give it. And we talked about this a little bit before. That's what I'm calling north, east, south, west. Joseph from the Meta Harmony Discord uses these as absolute. He uses these basically, as what I'm calling these. So he calls, this augmented, he calls north. I guess that's that. But more on this in a little bit. I'll come back to that, because I have a diagram pretty well explains this. But first, let's take a look at a very daunting looking diagram that is, I want to say, around a year old at this point. This is my version of the Meta Harmony wheel that includes more things than the Meta Harmony wheel does. These symbols right here represent diminished chords. And I would probably change, with the new terminology and symbols and stuff that I have now, I would change these symbols. You can see these are all the same symbol just because they're where the diminishes live. Okay, so this is the diminished that contains tonic. This is the one that contains the 5 of the key, and this is the one that contains the leading tone of the key. So if you're in the key of C, C diminished, G diminished, D diminished. And then these are my functional symbols that I go over. I think it's the very last video in my harmonic function series, where metaharmony would say yellow and red make orange. I would just say these two diminishes create tonic. So this is the symbol for tonic. This is the symbol for subdominant. And then this is the symbol for what metaharmony calls dominant. Dominant to me means that it has the flat 7, and this is just a major 6 chord, so, G major 6, E minor 7. Okay, back to what we were talking about. So now here we can see those same symbols that I just talked about, sort of representing a tonal center, and we have the seasons in 4 directions around each of them. Fall is north of tonic. Spring is north of mimic, and summer is north of lenient, or whatever you want to call each of these things, dominant or subdominant, or whatever. It doesn't matter. But if you pause here and just kind of analyze it a little bit, there is actually a logic to it. I'll just explain north really quickly. If you were to look at these all as major 6s, north would be the augmented that contains the note between the notch. In this chord, if we're in the key of C, and this is C major 6, between the G and A, there is the A flat, which is contained in this augmented. And the similar thing is going to go on here, where a note of this augmented E flat is between D and E, and then same thing here. If this is F major 6, a note of this augmented, specifically C sharp, is going to be between C and D, the notch of this chord. So north in each of these cases has like a specific placement in relation to, the function of these chords. It moves a particular way. So that's what I wanted to sort of capture with the north, south, east, west thing. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too confusing and cumbersome of an explanation. So we'll move on to diminished stuff. Again, the same 3 categories: absolute, earth, wind, and fire. This diagram I think is pretty self-explanatory, pitch specific. You can take a look at that. And then also I have these 3 symbols and terms to represent what would be the colors. This basically works exactly like the colors do. Again, the only reason I wanted a term to replace the colors is because for me, the colors are confusing since I have my own synesthetic associations. So for me, trying to remember that a C is yellow or E flat is yellow is really confusing, because to me, there's not that kind of logic to my synesthesia. E flat is purple, A is blue, so it's like very weird for me. Anyway, this is also kind of maybe a little bit less self-explanatory, but how these combine if you wanted to have, the secondary colors. So instead of saying orange, I would say earth and wind. Wind erodes rock and turns it into sand. Wind puts out fire and then you get smoke. Fire and earth create lava. So instead of saying green, what are they? Orange, green, and purple, you would say sand, smoke, and lava. Oh god. Tonal function. How do these diminished relate to the key? I like to use this circle diagram to be like tonal center specific. The 3 diminished as they relate to a key. That's what I'm giving these terms: mind, body, and spirit. Anytime you have a diminished with the leading tone of the key, that's your spirit diminished. Mind, body, spirit. And then if you wanted to talk about the intersection of these chords, then I have these other secondary symbols that I guess you can think of as, the intersection of each of these things. mind and body. Think of it like your brain across your whole entire body. The nervous system. So sense, body and spirit, life, mind and spirit, thought. This class, by the way, even though it feels a little bit cumbersome and maybe unintuitive, it's not as elegant as this. Meta harmony does not address, at least from what I understand, it doesn't talk about the diminished in a tonal context. The closest it gets is this. Let's talk about this. This is what he would call complementary, syntonic, and common. So again, the direction of resolution. You know, if you take any given diminished and you're moving it somewhere, where it moves to is a type of movement, and I wanted to give those each their own name and symbol. This represents what I call perch, which is where if you have this wheel, it would be a cross. So spirit to here, what would be tonic? Mind moving here in an across motion to dominant, and then here to subdominant. You know what Tom calls complementary. Let's take a look at my wheel again. So if here are the diminished, and you know here are the three primary chords, plumb would be a clockwise motion, and perch would be a counterclockwise motion. So if I'm moving from this diminished to the chord clockwise from it, that's a perch motion. That's pretty much that. If you look at that, you can see how the symbols, you know, match up with clockwise or counterclockwise motion, or in the case of perch, it goes right across the circle. Okay, 20-minute long video. Sorry, but I think I covered everything that I wanted to in this video. If you have any thoughts, definitely let me know your thoughts. I know I pretty much just gave a rundown of, you know, the terms without any practical examples or like playing them. I could maybe do that if you wanted, but I would like to know your thoughts and how it compares to the models that you've come up with so far. Let me know what you think.